Hi, my name's David Moorcroft, and welcome to my little slot on Athletics Weekly Ask the Athlete. I used to be a runner 39 years. Actually, I still am a runner. You're always a runner. 39 years ago, frighteningly, I broke the world record for the 5,000 meters, 13 minutes 0.41. And then a few weeks later, I broke the European record for the 3,000 meters at Crystal Palace, which is probably the race I'm most proud of. Went to 3 Olympic Games with mixed success, won a couple of Commonwealth Games, gold medals. In more recent years, for nearly 10 years, I was the chief executive of UK Athletics, which was really eventful, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. And I've been a broadcaster with the BBC since 1983, and for the last 3 Olympic Games with CBC Canadian television. And thoroughly enjoyed my life in athletics, and it's nice now to reflect a little bit on it. Thanks very much for all the questions you sent through. I'll try and get through as many as I possibly can. The first one is, who did you admire in athletics and what attracted you to the sport? And I think for me, it was the Tokyo Olympic Games in 1964. I was 11. I think I'd just joined my club, Company Godiva Harriers. I'd run a cross-country race at secondary school, and I'm pretty sure I'd been a member of the club for a week or so when the games started in Tokyo. But I didn't know much about athletics. I didn't know much about the Olympic Games. But those games were the moment that kind of flicked my switch. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. There was Lynn Davis and Mary Rand winning the long jump, Ken Matthews, the race walking. But the biggest unpacking was 800 meters. He came from right behind. David the kind of went ballistic down the home straight, and she won it. And it was just a wonderful moment. And I just thought, God, I'd love to do that. And also it transpired that Basil Heatley, who was a member of my club that I'd just joined, came second in the marathon behind the great Abebi Bikila from Ethiopia. So, when Basil got back, my early introduction to athletics at the club was seeing Basil's medal and being a little bit part of his success on a Sunday morning when I was 11. So that was the thing that really attracted me to the sport. And, joining Company Godiva Harriers at that moment couldn't have been better timing, which leads on to the next question, because it said, during your time at Godiva, when you were young, who would have been a big influence and inspiration to you? Well, there were so many of them, and I was so lucky that Company Godiva Harriers were probably the best, strongest Harrier club in the world. Not only did Basil Heatley get the silver medal at the Olympic Games and break the world best for the marathon, but in 4th place was a guy called Brian Kilby, who'd previously broke the world record and also been a European and Commonwealth gold medalist. There was a young Dick Taylor at the club beginning to develop as a great athlete, and ultimately became UK record holder for 5 and 10. Bill Adcox became one of the best marathon runners in the world. Colin Kirkham was emerging. But there was another athlete called Sheila Taylor, who became Sheila Carey at the club, who was 4th in the Olympic Games in Mexico at 800 meters and 5th in the Olympic Games in Tokyo at 1,500 meters. And she was well ahead of her time. And Sheila was a great inspiration because she was also coached by my coach, John Anderson, and I'll talk more about him. And we were broadly at the same level when I was a youngster. So Sheila was a massive influence. And the other kind of moment that captured my imagination was when I was 14, our coach, Mick Crossfield, took a group of us down to London, to the White City, to watch Great Britain versus the USA. And it was a fantastic day out. With the crowd, it was a full crowd. We could walk around the back of underneath the stands and watch the athletes warming up and get their autograph. But I remember watching Jim Ryan win the Emsley Car Mile and beat Kip Keino. And Jim Ryan and Kip Keino were 2 of my heroes. So to watch them and to feel the atmosphere of a big crowd, again, just cemented that notion that I love this and I want to be a part of it. So they were 2 really important things at that time in their life. And I think for most of us, we can track back to a single moment or a few moments that, as I said before, kind of flick your switch when you suddenly think, that's what I want to do. And it really excites you, the prospect. The next question was, if you were in your prime today, do you think you'd break the current 5,000 meter world record with the current training and technology advances? If so, how far underneath 13 minutes? Well, I can be pretty sure I wouldn't break the world record, even with the new shoes, which might sort of trim off a few seconds. But such has been the advances since I ran. I just ran the wrong side of 13 minutes, and now it's closer to 12 minutes 30. And it's just astonishing that not only do athletes run so fast nowadays, but they run so consistently for a longer season than we ever imagined. And there are more athletes at that level. So I just think you're good for your time, and you put that behind you, really. And I try not to ever compare against the current generation. And I used to enjoy speaking to Chris Chataway, who was one of my heroes, for lots of different reasons. He was a wonderful person in so many different ways, but he broke the world record for the 5,000 meters in a great race at the White City against Vladimir Kutz, I think in 1954 or something like that. And he ran about half a minute slower than I did, or maybe even more than that. But we both knew that for different reasons, we were both pretty good runners who did the level best we could at that time. So I just watched now world records and fast runs, and I'm just incredibly glad that I'm not having to race these guys nowadays. The next question is, what sort of shape was Dave in prior to LA in 84 in comparison with my world record breaking year in 1982? And then it goes on to say, I ran a 350 mile in Oslo, which I did, which suggested that you were in the same kind of shape as I was in 1982. The difference was in 82, I was injury free. I'd had a calf operation in late 1981. I'd gone through the whole of the winter, just the best ever training that I could ever imagine. In 1984, it was different. I was training really hard, but I'd got a groin problem that was almost like a hernia. And so I was having cortisone regularly. So although I was in good shape and I ran a 3 minutes 50 mile, the day after I ran the 3 minutes 50 mile, in fact, for 2 or 3 days, I was barely able to run. And I think kind of the writing was on you always got to have an injury as an athlete. So I can get my excuses out the way early on. So every bad race I ever ran, there's got to be a reason other than the fact I ran like a donkey. So apologies for the all the excuses. But in Los Angeles, it was a heat, a semi, and a final. And I was okay-ish in the heat. I had cortisone before the semi, ran okay in the semi. But in the final, my groin was really bad. And that was the worst experience of my athletics career, coming last in an Olympic Games. But actually, in many respects, it was the most powerful one I ever had. I wish it never happened. If I could turn the clock back, I'd love to have got a medal or at least been competitive. And people forget how incredibly well Tim Hutchings ran to finish fourth that day. And just to have been mixing it with Tim would have been great. But ultimately, I went up to Germany, had an operation. It took me months then before I could even run again. But when I started running again, it made me realize that the thing I love most, which goes back to why I joined Coventry Godiva Harriers, was that I was a runner. And the first few runs I did in 1985, after the operation in 1984, were very short, very slow and on my own, but they were amongst the most enjoyable I've ever had. So in a very convoluted way, I was in good physical shape in Los Angeles, training wise. But injury wise, it was a kind of accident waiting to happen. But it was an incredibly powerful experience, and I learned a lot from it. The next question is, how much of your success can you put down to your coach, John Anderson? And John, I think, is a genius. John started coaching me when I was 16, and if I would still regard him as my coach, he was utterly committed. He was a great motivator, a great educationalist, he analyzed, he was a great innovator. And he was the difference for me between being a decent runner and becoming an international athlete. He could turn water into wine, I think. He coached many athletes of not so much moderate ability, but he coached them from day one in their career and took them to international level, which I think is great. To take an athlete who's already very good to a higher level is fine. But with Johnny, he would take countless number of athletes from virtually nothing into the international team, and one or two of us on to medals and world records. His background was as a teacher, and many of the great coaches, I think, in those days, they were steeped in education and physical education. And I think that was a great kind of learning ground for them. But there was never a dull moment with John. He's, you know, a powerful Glaswegian who never takes a step back. You'd always want him in your corner. He'd fight your battles for you, literally. But honestly, and we were like chalk and cheese, so different in personality. But you know, I couldn't thank John enough. And it was in the wonderful days of amateur athletics. So it cost him a fortune to coach me for the privilege of coaching me for nothing, if you know what I mean. He did it all because he loved his athletes. He cared about us, and I couldn't speak highly enough of John. He was absolutely amazing, and he always knew the right thing to say, and he was at his best when you'd run badly, because he knew when to say something, what to say, how to pick you up. And there were loads of occasions when I ran really poorly. And the person I'd want to be with, obviously, you've got family and friends and others, but the person who I knew would say the right thing at the right time was John, and he always did. And I forever will be grateful for that. The next question goes back to 1982, and it said, "What a great year, moving up to the 5K, but your shorter distances also improved." So I got personal best right from the 800 through to 5,000 meters. And he said, did I think I was doing the wrong training from 1976 to 1981? I don't think I did. I think that John's philosophy from the day he started coaching me was, let's try and develop as much speed as you possibly can with adding on endurance to that. So throughout all my career, there was quite a large emphasis on speed in addition to endurance. And in those days, a lot of athletes ran slowly in the winter because the winters were severe. We didn't have synthetic tracks. So out of necessity, people tended to do longer, slow distance in the winter and then try to recover and rediscover speed in the summer. A slight exaggeration, but it was broadly like that. But John wanted us to run quickly all year round, albeit the emphasis would change. And so I think the training I was doing, you know, as an international athlete was pretty much similar and didn't change a huge amount in 82, other than in 1982 was the first year that I'd gone for a long period without being injured. So I was whacking in the miles. I was doing a long run on a Sunday morning and then going onto the track in the afternoon. But the quality of the sessions were fantastic. And I knew that I was in something in pretty special condition when I broke the world record, but I didn't know I was going to break the world record. And in fact, I didn't know I was going to break the world record until a lap to go when I looked at the clock, and I had a whole kind of 60 seconds to come to terms with the fact my life was going to change, which is kind of unusual because you're running down the back straight in Oslo at the end of a 5,000 meters. You're trying to sort of give it that serious face and, you know, saying, you know, keep trying and find something more. But in your brain, you're going, yippee, you're going to break the world record. So it was weird. So I think the balance of stuff just came perfectly right in 1982. And I said before that the race I was most proud of in 1982 was, I think about 10 days later, they had a big 3,000 meters at the Crystal Palace, which was part of a co-Ovet series that never happened because Seb was injured and Steve had been injured and was just getting back. But it was a really loaded 3,000 meter field. I led for the second part of the race, and it was a great race, a big battle with Sydney Marie, South African, who's then running for the USA. And I won it, and that was probably the race I was most proud of. So I think that answers that question. The next one is, regardless of ultimate accomplishments, who was the most talented runner you have faced against or watched? And this is really hard. And I really struggled with this one because, you know, I was part of the co-Cramo vet era. I mean, the talent they had was immense. And, you know, it was tough being kind of fourth best person over the mile or 1,500 meters in the UK. But the three ahead of you were number 1, 2, and 3 in the world. But you know, it was great to be mixing it with them. And then, you know, the era that had gone before me with Brendan Foster, Dave Bedford, Ian Stewart, and others was incredible. You know, I love racing John Walker from New Zealand. You know, I talked about Jim Ryan and Kip Kino, and then you remember the likes of Herb Elliott, Peter Snell, and others. But I think the athlete that I wouldn't have given myself a chance of competing against, and therefore in some respects was the most talented athlete I've ever witnessed, and the one that I enjoyed watching the most was Haile Gebrselassie. Not just because Haile won Olympic medals, broke world records over a range of distances, but because of his personality, because he stood at the line with a big smile on his face, because he loved running round and round in circles. He was never fazed by the opposition. And he wasn't arrogant. He wasn't big-headed. He was a wonderful, charming guy to be with. But he'd run through a brick wall to beat you. And he often had to, as we found out in Sydney at the 10,000 meters when he only just won the gold medal. So I think Haile was the athlete that, and I'd never raced him, but he started at the end of my career. But I wouldn't have known where to start racing against him. And in many respects, Mo Farah has kind of followed that footsteps, because Mo at his best, the opposition pretty much know that the only way they're going to beat him is if he has a bad day. And Mo knows that. And that's psychologically, when you've got the ability to go at any pace, but the ability to know that on that last lap, when the bell goes, not only have you got the speed to beat anyone, you've got the strength to beat anyone, and you've also got the tactical acumen. And Gebrselassie and Mo had that in spades. So that's the answer to that one. Biggest regret during my career? I mean, I'd love to have won an Olympic medal, and I never did. But I don't think you can have regrets, because you just accept it for what it is. You can. There's things you could say that you would do differently. Absolutely, things I would do differently. But I don't really regret anything. Los Angeles, as I said, was a terrible experience coming last in the Olympic Games. But you don't have to learn a lot about yourself. And as I said, the one silver lining from Los Angeles was that I rediscovered why I got involved in athletics in the first instance, just that I loved running. And if I could run fast, great. If I was a slow runner as I am now, it's fine. I've discovered a love of running again, even though I've got now 2 replacement knees, through parkrun, which I'm a massive fan of, and I love parkrun for everything it represents. And the fact that the kind of one of the proudest claims of parkrun is the average time each year has got slower and slower. There's more and more people in society are now comfortable at running. But it did ask for a regret. And the one thing probably, and this is, again, it's my problem, was that although I broke the world record at the 5,000 meters, I never really embraced the event. I never really loved the event. My love was the 1,500 meters. I love the road. I love cross country. But the 1,500 meters mile I just felt I had all of the answers. I felt I knew the event inside out. I wouldn't necessarily win. There'd always be often better runners than me. But I knew the tactics of a 1,500, the feel of a 1,500. And when I lined up, I kind of felt, even if I was nervous, I was going to have a good time. The 5,000 was different. And my regret is not really learning to love the event and getting inside the psychology of the event, of going round and round for 12 and a half laps, and really, really learning to love the event. And that, I would say that to any athlete in any distance, is that particularly if you move up, don't move up reluctantly, move up for the right reasons, but learn to love the event that you've gone to. Learn not to look back too much and think, oh, goodness, I wish I was still a 1,500 meter. So that was my regret, really, was my thought process. But, goodness gracious me, I loved my career. I loved every element of what I did for different reasons. I learned a huge amount from doing it. And, there's very few things I would change. The next question goes back to 1981. There was the National Cross Country Championships at Parliament Hill Fields in London. And I missed the start, which was, again, totally my fault. And a guy called, great runner called Julian Gota won it by a minute, 2 minutes. And the question was, do I think I would have beaten Julian Gota that day if I hadn't missed the start? Well, I can be absolutely certain that I don't think anyone would have beaten Julian that day, certainly not me. It was my fault I missed the start. It's a long story, but they used to have 2 guns. First time I ran the national senior in 1976, there was a 5-minute gun, and then the real gun went off 5 minutes later. And so I was being a clever dick at the start in 1981, because I hadn't run it again since then, taking my time to put my spikes on because the weather was really bad. And I wondered why everyone had gone to the start. And as I looked at my watch and I got to 2 minutes, I was thinking, right, I better put my spikes on now. And then the gun went. because they changed the gap between the two guns. At least that's what I think happened. But anyway, my stupid fault. I missed the start, but I spent the whole of the race going through the field and came fourth in the end. But Julian ran exceptionally well that day. And Parliament Hill Fields is the spiritual home of cross country. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to have won a national cross country, love to have won it that day, but I wouldn't have done because Julian won it, and Julian would have won it, I think, almost whoever in the history of British running the national cross country. I'm pretty sure Julian would have won whoever had been in the field that day. The next one is about a flight from Chicago. I was on a flight from Chicago to London in April 1995, and a bloke was sitting behind me, and he said, would I have signed my copy of the Boston Marathon results? I ran the marathon that weekend, this guy, that weekend, and sat behind you on the plane. Absolutely, I would have signed it. So, yeah, you should have tapped me on the shoulder. I like most runners, I always enjoy chatting about running and chatting about people's experiences. So probably a bit late now, but I hope you enjoyed running the Boston Marathon. Yeah, and yeah, I would absolutely have signed it. There was a question here about if you had your time again, what would you do differently? Well, not a lot, but it took about getting my head around 5,000. But it talked about, as a veteran runner, what's the best piece of advice you could give the athletes now? Well, I tell you, as a veteran, I ran as a vet-ish. I tried to break 4 minutes for the mile at 40. John Walker would have done it, but he got injured. He had a really bad Achilles, and I had a go at it, and I ran 4 minutes 2, which I think at the time was an outdoor world record for the mile. But then I got injured and never ran one again. But I think I've got two kind of answers to this. In more recent years, the two athletes that have given me the best moments, the most emotional moments in athletics, are Jo Pavey and Chris Thompson. Jo Pavey, at the age of 40, when she won the European the European 10,000 meters in, I think it was Zurich. And I watched that race, and as she came off the bend and kicked past the opposition, I kind of could feel the tears welling, and that doesn't often happen. And Jo had only months before had her, I think, second child. Flash forward to more recently, and Chris Thompson, at the age of 40, a week after his wife Gemma and Chris had their first child, Chris wins the Olympic marathon trial and qualifies for Tokyo. And I've known Chris since he was a junior, since the time I was at Youth Athletics. And, know his family, know Gemma's family in Cornwall really well, and know how hard it's been for Chris, how many injuries he's had, how hard he's had to fight to battle to get there, how wonderful his relationship is with his coach, Alan Story. And I just welled up again, just feeling so pleased for him and everybody who supports him, the family, the pride they must all feel. And so from the veterans' point of view, what Jo did in 2014, what Chris did more recently, Kelly Holmes winning double Olympic gold at the age of 34, just shows you that if you enjoy your athletics and you still feel you've got the motivation, then why not continue for as long as you want? And if you become a veterans athlete, having had a great career in athletics or whatever, and you want to drift into a nice competitive environment, do it. Don't worry about what others might say, oh, she's not as good as they used to be. It's a relatively short life, and it's an incredibly short life as an athlete, and the fun we have competing is worth every minute. So my advice really is for everybody, no matter what level you're at, no matter what pace you run, you've always got yourself as your main competitor. And just enjoy it for what it is, and enjoy it because you can. Because there'll possibly come a time in your life when you're injured or you're a bit decrepit like me, that you can't enjoy it in the way that you did. And take inspiration from what those around you do, and put a big smile on your face, and put a big smile on other people's faces. And then the final question, because I think we're kind of running out of time, was when I was at UK Athletics, what was the biggest challenge as CEO of UK Athletics? What am I most proudest of and most regretful about? So I'll just be really quick. I guess the proudest thing is 2 weeks after I went to what was then the British Athletic Federation, it went into administration. It hadn't got any money. So we created an interim body, UK Athletics 98. We took it out of administration, built it up really well financially, and got some great sponsors in with Aviva, BBC, domestic athletics back on the BBC. And I think that was great. We also had a really tough time with Nandrolone, and I suppose the regret, and I don't really regret it because needs must. But I'd love, in those first few years, I felt we were dealing with a lot of the kind of tougher things that I'd love to have got a little bit closer back to athletics, to why the reason why I got involved in the sport. And sometimes when you're at the governing body, ironically, you can be a little bit detached from grassroots and where it all really happens. But I think I'll wind up now because that's pretty much time. And it's been a short journey through my career, but as I said, it's been such fun. Wouldn't have missed it for the world, and look forward to watching more athletics this year and in coming years. And good luck to Athletics Weekly. Good luck to everyone. Thanks very much.